Доброго ранку, доброго дня, перепрошую, воно ще ранок. Доброго дня, шановні учасники і учасниці. Я вітаю сьогоднішніх спікерів нашої прес-конференції і в той же час презентації наших інструментів. Дозвольте представити наших сьогоднішніх гостей. Мене звати Сvitlana Garashchenko, я керівниця напрямку запобігання протидії торгівлі людьми проєкту Search, супровід урядових реформ в Україні. Сьогодні ми запросили наших надійних партнерів, з якими ми співпрацюємо в напрямку протидії і захисту від торгівлі людьми. Це пані Уляна Токарєва, заступниця міністра соціальної політики. Так, у нас пан Серhiy Magey, який представляє урядовий контактний центр, заступник директора, і Maxym Федорчук, який представляє Національну поліцію України, якраз відповідний департамент, який працює із боротьбою з торгівлею людьми. Отже, я не хочу забирати багато часу, тому що наші сьогоднішні гості дуже багато і знають, і працюють з даною проблемою. І я хочу, користуючись такою нагодою, передати слово для того, щоб могли більш детальніше і сказати про саму проблему, про те, як держава протидіє, як держава захищає наших громадян. І після виступів наших гостей ми вам покажемо, презентуємо розроблені спільно із нашими партнерами Міністерством соціальної політики, Національною поліцією, інструменти, які можуть значно допомогти і захистити наших українців і українок, які наразі перебувають за кордоном, і не тільки за кордоном, від того, щоб не потрапити в ситуацію торгівлі людьми. Пані Уляно, я вам передаю слово. Дякую.
Дякую. Так, ця тема є зараз дуже актуальною, адже ми всі знаємо, скільки людей переїхало зараз за кордон і знаходиться в достатньо вразливому стані. Зазвичай це жінки з дітьми, літні жінки, маленькі діти, жінки, які мають розірвані соціальні зв'язки зі своїми родинами, тому що багато хто залишився на території України, а вони були змушені поїхати, рятуючи дітей. Проте ми розуміємо, що для того, щоб ці жінки були в більшій безпеці, ми маємо надавати їм необхідну інформацію. І так, з самого початку, з березня місяця, така інформація про ризики потрапляння в ситуацію торгівлі людьми надавалася через СМС або через інформаційні матеріали, які розміщалися в залізничних вокзалах, на інших транспортних вузлах. Проте ми розуміємо, що такої інформації завжди недостатньо. Тому що дуже часто, коли людина виїжджає за кордон або знаходиться в вразливому стані, вона не усвідомлює, які ризики можуть бути з цим пов'язані.
And they are vulnerable, they fail to recognize the associated threats. And here we mean not just the adults, those women who are abroad and are unemployed and have no one and do not know the language. They had no information as to the existing risks, but we also are talking about children here because a lot of those children, especially those who crossed the border unaccompanied, meaning that they didn't have their parents accompany them, and so those children ended up at refugee camps, and they also represent a group that is at risk in terms of human trafficking. And I would also like to say that usually here we mean labor exploitation in relation to those women who do not know the specificity of employment, but also it could be a situation related to sexual exploitation on the part of those providing refuge. And so to prevent those situations, it is vital that every Ukrainian who had to flee abroad has access to the information that they need, and together with the search project, with assistance from the government of Canada, we have set up a platform that is called Safe Women. It's a website that you could visit and find useful information there. In Ukraine, we also have instances of human trafficking, and those are not always related to being abroad, but also those are members of the vulnerable groups who are still in Ukraine. And we've had over 30 cases like that, and those are the people who are now receiving the assistance from the social service providers. They have been recognized as victims and are now receiving the financial assistance that they need. And those situations happened not in Ukraine, but also in a country that we are neighboring with, in Russia, and also in France. This is as far as we know. And we keep on working, we keep on raising awareness non-stop to make sure that we have qualified professionals available for consultation, for assistance when people approach them. We need to make sure that those experts have the tools, they have the skills, that they have the SOPs in order to support the people who need this kind of support. Thank you so much, Uliana. I also have a question, a technical one. Ashley, are you with us? Oh, yes, I can see that you are. This is fantastic. So I have now the pleasure to pass the mic over to Ashley Mulrooney, who's an advisor and who's also leading the international assistance at the Canadian Embassy in Ukraine. And Surge is funded by the Canadian government. And I just have to say that Canada is one of those countries for whom human rights, women's rights, anti-trafficking effort is very important. And so we are happy to have Ashley here with us today. Ashley, over to you.
Так, доброго дня. Дякую, Svitlana. I'm very pleased to be able to participate today and to recognize the hard work of everyone who has worked on this initiative. I'd like to recognize the Ministry of Social Policy, the Ministry of Internal Affairs, the National Police, the Commissioner on Gender Equality, and everyone who's worked together during this very difficult time for Ukraine to protect vulnerable populations, especially Ukrainian women and children, from becoming victims of human trafficking. Canada is, of course, deeply concerned about the risks associated with human trafficking faced by Ukrainians, both inside and outside Ukraine. We are proud to support this initiative to help prevent human trafficking, and we recognize that this support is especially crucial during this very difficult time. I'm so pleased to be able to participate today in the launch of numerous important resources to assist anti-trafficking efforts. Today, you'll hear about chatbots on Telegram, the Safe Women website, and other important initiatives. And these are all important as much important to your work on this issue as they are important to Canada. These resources will provide further assistance to victims and potential victims of human trafficking. Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 2022 and its devastating attacks across the country, there has been unimaginable suffering caused in Ukraine and trauma and millions have been forced to flee Ukraine. In response to the war, Canada has supported the Surge project to provide flexible expert advice and assistance to the government of Ukraine. We appreciate that the Surge team was able to support the government of Ukraine to help protect the human rights of Ukraine's most vulnerable populations. Human trafficking is a form of gender-based violence. Canada's position is very clear. Human trafficking is a heinous crime which is aimed at and exploits the most vulnerable. The victims, mostly women and children, are deprived of normal lives. Canada supports the efforts of the government of Ukraine, non-governmental organizations, and individual citizens to counter beliefs and behaviors that perpetuate violence and exploitation. We support the efforts of partners in Ukraine to assist trafficking victims, to provide support services, and counter demand. I want to thank everyone here today for all of your important and difficult work in this very challenging environment. Canada stands with Ukraine and with all of you here today to combat the scourge of human trafficking. Дуже дякую. Гарного дня.
Дуже вам дякуємо, пані.
Thank you so much, Ashley. for your kind words of support and for your unwavering actual support that we are receiving from the Canadian government. And we are moving on. We have another speaker who unfortunately wasn't able to join us in person. This is Kateryna Levchenko, Government Commissioner for Gender Policy, but she will be joining us online, and I'm sure that you all know her very well. So we are gonna give it another moment. In the meantime, Maxym, I would like to pass the mic over to you while we are waiting for Kateryna to join us on behalf of the National Police of Ukraine. Please, the floor is yours. Yes, thank you so much. Thank you for having me and for giving me the opportunity to speak on behalf of the National Police in terms of the risks and threats associated with the war. And first of all, I would like to say that a lot of Ukrainians have become displaced. They either had to flee the country or move elsewhere within Ukraine, and a lot of those Ukrainians are vulnerable in terms of human trafficking. And from the very beginning of this full-scale invasion, the National Police of Ukraine, together with the Ministry of Social Policy, with the NGOs, with the search projects, and other partners, we have started working on prevention and on awareness. And I agree with Uliana, and I support what was said. We really did invest effort into raising awareness at the train stations, at other public spaces. We distributed leaflets, other kinds of information materials to for those Ukrainians to be better equipped and be able to protect themselves better. Now the chatbot was developed together with our colleagues from the University of Internal Affairs, and it's called Safe Women. You can find it on Telegram, and there you could learn more about the associated risks and about the steps that you could take if you happen to be in this kind of a situation. You could approach both governmental organizations, NGOs in Ukraine and abroad, together with our mobile operators. We've started this initiative where we would send text messages to over 4 million Ukrainians who had to flee abroad with the respective information. Plus, when Ukrainians are abroad, women and children, it is very important that we, as institutions, keep in touch with Europol and other competent authorities in order to protect that group of citizens. And this is what we have been doing. We have set up Ukrainian Task Force. It's a group that facilitates quick response, information exchange to help Ukrainians in different kinds of situations and to prevent any kind of misinterpretation by the mass media outlets. Let me read out what Europol shares with us, the data, I mean, in terms of human trafficking that could be potentially dangerous to the citizens of Ukraine. From the very beginning of the full-scale invasion through the Europol channels, we have received 63 notifications of alleged human trafficking in relation to Ukrainians. Only 6 criminal proceedings have been instituted, as far as we know, in relation to the social exploitation, and those also include the cases started by or initiated by the Migration Department regarding our Ukrainian girls in Poland. and we managed actually to apprehend two perpetrators in Poland who were recruiting the girls and sending them off further to Wrocław. So we managed to apprehend them at some point, and then later on two more. So we have been in touch. We have been collecting and processing the information, the notifications that we receive. We do that immediately in order for us to be able to take the respective steps. At the end of last year, Ukraine was first included into the European multidisciplinary platform to prevent threats, and that includes, among other things, a plan to prevent human trafficking, and Ukraine has attended 4 large-scale European operations to prevent human trafficking, and Ukrainian police participated in that effort. We served notices under Article 149 to 12 individuals. Now, in terms of statistics, from the beginning of this year, we initiated 123 proceedings. 47 individuals were served notices of suspicion, and 59 individuals were recognized as victims. That group includes men, women, and children. So we continue this cooperation with our partners from Europe, with Europol, and other agencies and organizations. We meet with our colleagues and we discuss safe employment practices for those Ukrainians who have been temporarily displaced, and practically every country with whom we have been in touch, including their employment departments, they are now distributing awareness materials in Ukrainian among Ukrainians. They have set up web resources again for those Ukrainians to be able to learn more about safe employment practices abroad. And so to prevent this kind of situations for Ukrainians, please use and trust only official sources that give you information about employment or accommodation or moving abroad in general.
Also, I'd like to note that over the course of this year, the most widespread abuse types were sexual and labor abuse. Thank you, Maxym. We extremely appreciate your work and our cooperation in the direction of combating human trafficking. And one of the still important components is a resource where people could go to if they find themselves in a situation related to human trafficking, or they feel under threat of becoming victims of human trafficking. And in this case, it's extremely important that every citizen remember phone numbers of hotlines and the government contact center where they can reach out for help, reach out for information, reach out for support, and reach out for redirection. That's why we invited the state contact center. I think everybody, or a lot of people know the 1547 number, hotline number, where a lot of people can reach out to. And we have the deputy director of the state contact center, Mr. Serhiy. Over to you. I am glad to meet you all. Extremely grateful for being invited here to discuss one of the most pressing matters of the nowadays times, the human trafficking. I would also like to touch on the topic of domestic violence. The state institution, government contact center, currently supports 8 hotlines, including a hotline on combating human trafficking and combating domestic violence. 1547-1547 is the number available to the public. We can see it's being advertised on banners and elsewhere, but over a long period of time, unfortunately, we didn't have the capability to support communication for those people who have left abroad and maybe found themselves in a troublesome situation that was related to human trafficking. So nowadays we have a direct municipal contact line 044-284-1943. It's a hotline on human trafficking matters. As for the short number 1547, it's a toll-free number that you can dial in Ukraine. It's a stationary number. The stationary number on its own is a tolled number, tolled according to the tariffs of the mobile carriers. The hotline itself was established in 2020, and over the time of its existence, almost 109,000 appeals were processed. The experts that monitor and support the 1547 hotline register appeals from citizens or about citizens who have suffered from human trafficking. They register information matters related to combating domestic violence, gender-based violence, and child abuse, or any threats of such deeds. Would also like to bring your attention that the experts of the hotline provide psychological support. They are educated in psychology. The full-scale war with Russia led to adjustments in the work of the hotline, and the spectrum of matters that we addressed through this hotline became broader. We started addressing such issues as provision of humanitarian aid, evacuation, and certain matters of the social domain. An interesting point is that when addressing the hotline, 1547 hotline, if the operator identifies threat to health or well-being or life of the person calling, the operator can decide to dispatch the police or medical services, while at the same time providing psychological support to the person who has called the hotline until the first responders services reach that person. The hotline has its own website with a huge amount of information related to violence signs, ways of combating violence, which authorities to reach out to. And the government contact center has a chatbot available through Telegram and Viber messengers that also contain the same information, and the person reaching out to the hotline can get informational support and advice. There's also a provision for people that have internet connection but don't have any mobile signal. They can leave their message indicating that they have no physical ability to reach out to them, and the operators of the contact center or the hotline on combating human trafficking and domestic violence will conduct a callback, providing expert
визначений заявником під час залишення цього повідомлення. Якщо говорити про цифри за час повномасштабного вторгнення, то
Speaking of numbers, from the day of the full-scale invasion, from the beginning, we have processed about 5,000 calls related to domestic abuse, violence against children, gender-based violence, and luckily only 51 of those calls had to do with human trafficking. I think we should understand that the very specificity of the hotline and the complexity of the issues we're dealing with, they have certain implications, and they somewhat limit our citizens. Maybe limit is not the best word. What I'm trying to say is that the majority of the calls we are receiving is about the concerns, and the callers are not eager to openly speak about their situation because they are afraid of the retaliation that might follow from the individuals concerned. And so we need to talk about this. We need to promote our communication channels for the people to actually have the opportunity to approach us and share their situation and get help. Thank you so much. And I would also like to add that if you are aware of human trafficking, if you have witnessed it, and you know that that person cannot call for help, you could do it yourself. And we know that victims sometimes simply have no way of doing it on their own. I can see that Kateryna has joined us. Kateryna is the Government Commissioner on Gender Policy. So over to you, maybe without further ado. Everyone knows you, so please. Thank you so much, Svitlana. Greetings, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. All right, so greetings to all the participants of this event, and thank you so much to the Ministry of Social Policy of Ukraine for this great initiative. We have spoken by now about the practical aspects that are absolutely essential, but let me turn to the policy itself at this point. I mean, the state policy in terms of human trafficking and its combating. Steps have to be taken to ensure that the rights of our citizens are protected, that they have access to social assistance, that our law enforcement can perform effectively, and it has to be in line with the legislation of Ukraine and the international commitments we have undertaken regarding human trafficking and its prevention and countering. So I would like to speak a bit about the critical and important events that we have attended and that have direct influence on our policy. First of all, that would be the framework agreement with the UN to prevent and combat the conflict-associated violence, the crimes committed by the Russian forces, armed forces in Ukraine, tell us that sexual violence, crimes against humanity, war crimes is something that those are something that Russian forces resort to and have been from the very beginning of this war. In May, our Vice Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, Olga Stefanishyna, signed the framework document on the cooperation with the UN. And on behalf of the UN, it was signed by the Special Representative on conflict-associated violence prevention. And in that program, one of the priorities is combating human trafficking. Here we're talking about the trafficking associated with social exploitation. The government has set up a working group to manage this process and to help the victims, and also designed a plan to operationalize the program. Speaking of prevention of human trafficking, among other things, we mean coordination between the actors, which is absolutely crucial to ensure that people get the assistance that they need. We need to coordinate our efforts with our partners in other countries, with the international organizations, taking into account the fact that several millions of Ukrainians have fled abroad, mostly being women and children, and are in vulnerable situations. So we need to strengthen our protection, the protection that we are providing to the vulnerable groups, including in cooperation with the international partners. It is essential that the victims receive comprehensive assistance, both from the state and from the NGOs. So at the initiative of our Vice Prime Minister Olga Stefanishyna, and together with the Office of the Government Commissioner and with the UN agency, we have set up a center, actually several centers in Lviv, Kyiv, Dnipro, Zaporizhzhia. We are also planning to open them in Odessa, Poltava, Kropivnitsky, and Chernivtsi, to make sure that those Ukrainians who have become IDPs and have been affected by this war could get primary psychological, legal, social assistance, and if there is a suspicion or an established fact that the individual was victimized by sexual violence, among other things. So if we establish that fact, then this person could be managed by a case manager, which means personalized approach. Again, 1547, the hotline is also is another critical component of this effort. La Strada Ukraine as our partners, they also have an 800 number. It is actually 800 500 335 116. So it is it works 24/7, and if the victim does not want to discuss that in person with the specialist, they could call the hotline and vice versa. This is how we coordinate our effort. And according to the data that we have, when we open another center, we receive more requests via the Aurora Center, where those victimized by violence and human trafficking could receive psychological assistance. You could also Google it up. It is Aurora platform of psychological assistance. It is easy to register, so feel free to use this as a resource as well. There is another thing I would like to mention. Unfortunately, my connection was not very good at the very beginning of this meeting, and perhaps, Uliana, you have mentioned this already, so apologies for repeating what has been said, but I feel that I should absolutely mention this. In October 1819, Ukrainian delegation actually successfully defended its declaration at the competent UN committee under the same name. We are a member of the UN, and we are signatories to the convention. To file those reports is our obligation, and we should follow its provisions to a T. And so we have raised a number of issues at that committee, including the issue of combating human trafficking, because Article 6 is very clear. The member states have to take every single action that is required to prevent human trafficking, trafficking in women, and using women for prostitution. So our goal today is to take those recommendations that the Ukrainian delegation received from the committee and put them into operation to make sure that our state policy is as effective as can be. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. This war has been waged for 9 years running, and it is associated with a great number of threats for Ukrainians, both in the temporarily occupied parts of Ukraine and abroad, which includes human trafficking in Ukraine and outside of the country. So we need to work together, and we need to keep investing effort to make sure that we deliver the services that are in line with all the national and international standards. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thanks a lot, Ms. Kateryna, for finding the technical ability to join us. And thanks for those messages. I am sure they're extremely helpful, and I'm sure there will be people who will find them useful, and maybe people whose life they are going to save. We have one more section, the presentation of the tools themselves that Ms. Ulyana and Mr. Maxym mentioned today, the tools developed jointly jointly with the Ministry and the National Police, supported by our project. I'm going to briefly present them and introduce them and talk about what you can get through using this resource. First of all, it's the chatbot that we mentioned before, chatbot called Safe Women Bot. It's a collection of information useful for those citizens, female citizens included, that found themselves in a human trafficking related situation, and also for witnesses. So if you witness a situation, what can you do? How can you help? This chatbot provides instructions. If you find yourself in a situation related to human trafficking, what to do, where to address, how can you self-help, self-aid. There's also a separate tab in that chatbot of all the contact details of all 28 countries of the European Union, contacts of where to reach out, hotline phone numbers, law enforcement authorities, NGOs that can provide you with psychological and legal support depending on the country where you found yourself. Also, if you are in a situation related to sexual exploitation, you've heard that this is one of the most widespread of forms of human trafficking, and there are separate pieces of advice on how to get protection, how to get help from the state where you are at the moment in this chatbot. We also hear a lot about the situations recently where you lose contacts with your relatives that fled Ukraine, that fled the war, and there is a lack of understanding on how to reach out to them, where to contact them, who can help reaching out to them. You can find that information. You can find the algorithm, the procedure on how to find your relatives as soon as possible who potentially might find themselves in a situation related to human trafficking. This is the QR code that gives you the link. You scan it, you open the Telegram bot, and the link itself is going to take you directly to the chat, from which you can get information that might be useful for you, that might protect you better. There's a bit more details. As mentioned before, this can be the procedure, the algorithm of actions. Another option, another crucial piece of information are templates for documents on how to appeal, how to write some sort of an address. Because people often most don't understand which format the documents have to be in to find a missing person as soon as possible. So this chatbot has templates ready that you can download, and that will significantly simplify things for you. There's also advanced information on the rights for you as victims, on what can you count on, what kind of aid and help you can receive, what kind of support you can receive. All of that is also provided through the chatbot. If you have more time, if you have more time resource, we highly advise to visit the website developed by the Ministry of Social Policy and the National Police of Ukraine, supported by the project, that also has wider scope of information, signs of potential situation of human trafficking, how to safeguard yourself, what to do to make sure that you don't become a part of a crime circle that is involved in such activities. It sounds like human trafficking, something that is incomprehensible for a lot of people. You can go into details on what this specifically is, and you can find this information on this website. There's a lot of useful links, a lot of useful contact phone numbers where you can reach out for help. The website also provides more details on what is violence itself, because people often most don't understand that this or that person is suffering from this or that form of violence at the moment. You can read this on the website and understand the situation. And there's also advice on gathering evidence on how to prove that you are in a situation, and what can you count on to receive specific legal status, what kind of aid you can, all those advices and all the aid is provided on the website. The website is constantly updated. Once we come across any useful, crucial information, we translate it from the country that we receive this information and publish it. Another benefit of the chatbot, just to have it in your Telegram channel, it's very easy to use. It's written in really basic language, doesn't use any terminology that you might be spending time on looking for, and also it contains all the contacts, consulates, other institutions in different countries, because sometimes you end up in a country whose language you don't speak on the proper level yet, and you can reach out to the consulate and receive help in supporting your interests, defending your interests, maybe providing aid on reaching out to the police of the country where you are based at the moment. And there are also references to other electronic resources that might be potentially useful for you. So this is the website with key messages, key links of what is useful to know and what information you can get from there. The QR code that you can see also leads to the website. You can scan it and you can immediately go to the website, get the information. As well, you can find on the website developed by the National Police and the Ministry, supported by the project, you can find the algorithm of activities of looking for people who are abroad and might have found themselves in a situation related to human trafficking. You can see templates of documents, you can see algorithm procedures of activities, and hopefully I covered fully not just the resources, but also the materials that you might need to protect yourself and your relatives, your close ones, from ending up in a situation related to human trafficking. I would also like to add that related to this platform, people rarely apply this information to themselves, but they often can apply this information to somebody they know, somebody in their environment. There is a very important section on the website on what to do if you witness a crime, or if you can see some red flags, some threatening signals. If you treat this information from that point of view, there is an ability to safeguard yourselves as a consequence, and first and foremost, your relatives, your close ones. We're heading into the Q&A session. Feel free to ask questions to all of our speakers. Hopefully Ms. Kateryna is also with us. I know that there's at least one question. There's a question on YouTube, correct? Please forward it to me.
Частина суспільства схильна бачити винними у
Part of the society tends to victimize tends to see the victims as the guilty party, as if they didn't take enough precautions to safeguard themselves. That's a very important question. Thank you. Thanks to the person who asked this question. Which one of our guests would like to take the floor and answer? If I may. From the legal standpoint and moral standpoint, we cannot perceive people who ended up in a situation that they are victims of human trafficking as the guilty party, as somebody to blame for this. Those people are in a very vulnerable state caused by certain circumstances, and it's just not possible for us to think that way. The state has to provide those people with all the support and help. Also, do not be scared of reaching out to the police or social protection services or NGOs that might be able to help you. Maybe not every victim realizes they are in a situation related to human trafficking, and specifically for that you can reach out to those informational resources, to the website or to the chat bot, and do not be scared of reaching out for help to the state. The state has tools and means and methods of providing such support and help, and to reach out to, in case they reach out to the police to start a criminal case. I would also like to add that never a person who is a victim of a crime is not a party to blame, because the action was done by someone else. All of us have the right to make a decision on what to do with our lives, whether we do something criminal or not, but we never have a choice of having something criminal done to us. Even if we think that some person used some information recklessly or used some reckless behavior, but the crime was somebody else's choice. Thanks, Ms. Ulyana. Maybe if Ms. Kateryna is still with us, maybe she would like to add a couple of words.
Будь ласка.
Я з вами, пані Світлана.
I am still with you. Just like to ask to repeat the question if possible. Yes, 1 second, sure. Part of the society tends to blame those people who ended up in the situation with human trafficking in the situation, for them being too reckless. Maybe. What can you say about that? Well, the international documents state that the guilt cannot be assigned to the victims in situations related to human trafficking. That's the first point. Secondly, my experience in the La Strada NGO of over 20 years, and this organization also deals with combating human trafficking and meeting with victims. All that experience says that all the victims, they were in a vulnerable state. Maybe at the moment when they ended up in a situation, maybe there was a momentarily circumstances or extended circumstances, but the vulnerable state is something very difficult for a human being, for a person, and it affects the person's behavior. There's also an explanation by the European Human Rights Court on what's vulnerability and how vulnerable states affect ending up in a situation related to human trafficking. So the European Human Rights Court takes the side of the victim in this matter, because they understand how difficult it is in such a situation to take considered, thought-through decisions. International law also says that legally the guilt lies with the person who creates the situation for the other person. We need informational campaigns on preventing the risks of ending up in a situation related to human trafficking. But putting the blame with the victim is absolutely not right, not the right thing to do. Thank you, Ms. Kateryna, for the answer. And there was also the question related to this legal status of the person who is a victim of human trafficking. What do we do to achieve that? That question is probably to me. The key step, the first step, is to reach out to the social protection directorate at your place of residence, and then the experts that work there are going to conduct all the necessary activities to help the person to legally achieve this status. That's the first and most important step. Also, on the website of the Ministry of Social Policy and the National Social Services Service that then takes over those matters after receiving information from the community, you can find advanced information, detailed information on how the process goes. But the key step is the first step, and it's, as experience shows, the most difficult one. Thanks, Mr. Liana. I cannot see any additional questions through online, so technically, if we are confirmed, there's no questions. Okay. So then, I would like to thank, on behalf of the Surge project, I would like to thank our speakers for finding time and taking part. Ms. Kateryna, for being able to join us despite all the technical matters, technical issues, and to discuss such an important topic, important matter that is not always, unfortunately, perceived seriously in the society or gets blamed on the victims. So the state institutions, the national police, the Ministry of Social Services, the state contact center, hopefully together we'll be able to protect our citizens, both in the country and outside the country, from ending up in a situation, becoming victims of human trafficking. Hopefully this is going to be one of the first offline events of discussing, raising awareness with the society on this matter. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.